All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this latest version of Automation Hour. We will jump right into some of our housekeeping. So first up on our slide deck, if you want to jump to our next slide, is just our logistics. We do have everyone on mute. However, we invite you to post questions either in the questions widget here in GoToMeeting or on our Automation Hour Trailblazer community page. And of course, we invite you to interact with us on your favorite social media. We have our own website with our upcoming, as well as LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube. So we also have a number of great sessions coming up. So we definitely encourage you to hit Automation Hour to register for those sessions. And we are getting ready to put out our call for speakers for the next half of the year. So be on the lookout for that. And if you're interested in presenting, please let Rakesh or I know. As always, we want to say thank you to our sponsors, and we actually have a new sponsor in Salto today. So we want to make sure that we say thank you to them and also to our other sponsor, Concrete.io. Without these two sponsors, we would not be able to bring this to you every week at no cost. And of course, we got to give a shout out to our founding trio. So Rakesh, Jen, and David, 6 years ago, started this for the community, and it has continued to grow and thrive. But as we all know, things change. So your current co-hosts are me, Michelle Hansen, and of course Rakesh Gupta, who's here with us today as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our guest presenter of the day, Maria. So Maria, take it away.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for your time today. I really appreciate the chance to share some knowledge, have a chat, learn some new things today. So I'll start with just a little bit about me. I am a 3 times mommy, and I'm also a 14 times certified Salesforce person. I've an interesting path, and so I wanted to share a little bit about that in case there are others here who may have an unconventional path. I've worked for about 9 years in the Salesforce space, but I actually started my career as a nonprofit communication director. I'm in the Austin Metro, and so about that time, there were several startup companies that were really booming. I switched into tech support, so my official title was Tech Support Ninja. So I love to represent for any people coming out of customer support here. I moved into a solo admin role at that same company, and we grew our team. From there, I moved into consulting. I was a consultant with a partner for 5 years, and then I moved to Salesforce recently, just the end of last year, and that's where I'm at. I mentioned I'm in the Austin, Texas metro for fun. I like to enjoy time with my family, do things outside, plan vacations, take vacations, everything. So, it's always important to have a well-rounded kind of situation. So really appreciate, learning about you guys as well as we talk through our use cases here. Okay, so today we're going to go through a presentation that presents the problem to solve, how we build the solution design for it, implementation for it, and I'll show you some screenshots first. All of this information is going to be presented on the Automation Hour website, so you'll have the slide deck. We'll do some demos. If we have time, what I'd like to do is show a demo of how the entire piece of automation works as an end user, and then also show you how I troubleshoot them under the hood. I think that might be helpful. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Okay, so the problem that I wanted to position and talk to y'all about today is this problem of I need people to work with me, okay? How do I get help with what I'm working on? And so across, I don't know, probably 15 plus implementations and working at different orgs, as a worker, I get these problems. When I try to just have an open approach of, hey, how can Salesforce help you, right? What's going on? I don't know what I'm supposed to work on every day, right? I have this list of stuff, and my manager has this list of stuff I'm supposed to do, but I don't really know what it is. I don't know when it's due. I don't know what's important. So those are common problems I hear as a worker. And then as a manager of workers, I get these types of questions. I don't have visibility into my team's work. I don't have visibility into blockers about my team's work. My team is working out of email. My team is working out of Notepad, right? Or I need more concrete data on what takes my team's time so we can determine where to improve, right? Whether you're looking at it as on the sales side, revenue generation, or the support side as a cost center, it's important to know what takes my team's time and can I make my team more efficient, right, to drive our business. I don't usually get, can we get confetti on that? But that would be fun. So those are the types of problems I have. What you'll notice during the presentation is I try to keep these terms broad. We're going to use an example with sales, but really this could apply to any team working in Salesforce, right? Salesforce is so flexible that it's really simple to design a solution where the end user ends up inundated with different types of things, different times of work. Do I use chatter? Do I use email? How do I track my work? So we want to give them a streamlined option that would work kind of regardless of their role. So from that problem statement, I build out business requirements. And I wanted to show you an example of this because I'm seeing more and more that admins are responsible for more than just knowing Salesforce, right? We act as BAs in a lot of our situations where we really need to figure out what are the actual business requirements. And when I do this, there's a great trailhead on business requirements. And if you look at the user experience design trail, there's some really cool links to those as well. But what you kind of can see at a high level is we want to first define who are the people that we're building this process for. So that's the persona. And then what is it that they're trying to accomplish? That's the user story. And then how am I going to articulate success for that particular story? So we'll see that here with two personas. The first one I have is a sales rep. Okay, so that's a persona. Their story is as a sales rep, I can create work items for other teams to assist in my work on a deal so I can close business. I try to not use Salesforce object names when I build user stories and acceptance criteria so that that can be determined by the solution design, right? I don't start designing too early. So you'll notice I'm not talking about what specifically I'm working on. And the closest I get is to deal here, where we're talking opportunities, right? So for acceptance criteria, first, a sales rep should be able to request help from a team through a work item that that person creates. And they can view those work items on a deal. Okay, so then the next persona would be the work item team member. I again try to keep these broad. In this example, we're going to talk about work item teams as finance, as legal, as sales operations, customer success. So it could be anybody. It's very simple to say, well, let me give each of them a persona. But when we can build for scale, we can just say, well, all of them at the end of the day need to receive these items and work these items and then pass it back. So we're building that into our persona here so we don't get too customized on each particular business unit. So that person's story is, as a work item team member, I can view work items assigned to my team so that I can help the sales team close business. The signs of success for them are that they get a work item assigned to the correct team on creation, that they can view these work items that are assigned to the team, and that they get an email notification upon work item creation. I don't always go to this level of detail with the email notification piece, right? Ideally, if everybody is working in Salesforce, then they can leverage a dashboard or a report or notifications. But what I've seen is it is common, especially in sales situations where you might be working with legal or finance teams. Those teams don't work primarily in Salesforce, and so it is nice to give them some kind of an email notification because they're not going to spend their full day, refreshing a dashboard to see if there's work for them. Okay, another persona that I could have had that I didn't include here was a sales manager. And their story might be, as a sales manager, I can report on what my team needs to close business. So I can build training materials for them, right? So say we implement this and we see there's 10 times more work item requests for finance than anybody else. It gives us a clear picture of what we need to focus on next. Okay, all right. So there's a couple of different design options that I have. So I wanted to talk through those here. And again, it's really important to give yourself time to scratch pad your design and socialize it and kind of see what makes the most sense for your particular business. So with manual work item creation, that would just mean they click new record on an action somewhere, they click, they fill in a bunch of fields and then they hit save. That would work, but it could result in a lot of clicks. It could mean that the way that the user enters data is wrong, right? Like say I have something that says when this and this is true, the priority is high, right? There's nothing stopping from a user who's entering that data from just saying that it's high anyway, okay? It could also require more training. So if I have to have them fill out 7 fields because I need to know the details about department, then I'm going to have them put in more information. It's going to take them more time rather than maybe having some automation figure that out for me. Okay. So the next item here is maybe they make the work item manually, and then I have a record triggered flow, pick it up and make the updates. That would work too. I think about that. But another thing that I'm limited to when I do that is I'm limited on that work item, whatever it ends up being, to the page layout that's assigned to them. So say that the sales team is using this work item for themselves to track their own work as well as other people, right? Now I've got to look at, do I need another record type? Do I need to make some fields required in one use case and not the other? So, it would work again, but let's see if what else we've got at the table. So Orchestrator, I've been spending some time learning about Orchestrator. It's really cool. I fully believe that you could use this to do it, but I will say there is a cost that comes with it. So just being real as an admin, that would work. I'll put it in my notes as something that could happen in the roadmap, but let's see what else we've got at the table, okay? And so this one, spoiler alert, is the winner for me, but I wanted to go with a screen flow plus the flow engine. And so the screen flow is going to replace the manual work item creation because I can choose what fields I'm going to put in front of the business user to get their input, right? And in that sense, I can choose different fields based on input they put in without needing a different page layout or a different record type. The flow engine here I'm referring to, I've seen in other presentations referred to as the flow design framework. You'll see a link to that later. But the idea here is there's automation that's running, and it might include a main flow and then sub flows that run from it based on applicable business logic. Okay, and there's a lot of good things about using a design framework like this. It can allow you to just document and troubleshoot easier because you know exactly where to go to see what's running right now. And it gives you the ability to make incremental changes and subflows that you can deploy easier without needing to worry about maybe a giant flow or a master flow getting overwritten or having a problem. Okay, the last thing, you could accomplish this with the lightning component and it would work, but the ScreenFlow and the Flow engine has got this, so we're not going to need a lightning component. That would be overkill here. Okay. Okay, so if there are questions, you are welcome to type them in the chat. And if you have them, I will try to stop and address them as we go. So just to let you know, that's available to you too. Okay. Alrighty. So design again, design continued. Just always do it, okay? I love to build design. I think I might actually like designing more than I like building, which probably makes sense why I went down the path of architecture. But there's something really fun about the flexibility of saying, what are the problems we're trying to solve and what's available for me to build them? And then being able to go, okay, now that I see that picture, what maybe could be a quick win for the team or what could be a fast follow, and being able to get feedback on that is really handy as well. So always do design, always do it before you build, okay? And I've heard different people say maybe they use the flow canvas as where they do design. That works. I'm even more basic. I will usually just open up Google Drive and open up a spreadsheet and just start typing in the spreadsheet. That way everything's in order, and if I need to copy and paste because I forgot something, I can move it around. I don't have to worry about my lines being straight or connected to things. And I'll have maybe like one column will say, here's what's happening. The next column will just be my variable place where I'm like, okay, to do this, I'm gonna need a variable for that, and I'll put them over there. And then at the end, I can go, what are all the variables I needed? Should I just pull the record instead, or should I go ahead and assign them? It just gives you an idea for complexity, right? And then once you have your design, you can get feedback on it. And I've really enjoyed at times getting feedback from people who aren't even in my org. So, I would say keep your design client agnostic if you're a partner, or make sure you're not putting in any information that your company may not want shared. But one place that I've really enjoyed is Ohana Slack. If I'm working on a problem and I could really see going one way or the other, I'll go put an ask in there and I can share this Google Drive document with a link to provide comment access without sharing any confidential information about my org, right? Just to get a gut check on it. So it's just some thoughts. I also have an awful memory. So as I'm going through design, I may put a notes column in to say, here's why I chose this approach rather than this other approach. And that can be handy as you're getting feedback, or in build when you go, why did I build it this way? Why did I design it this way? To go, oh, right, I'm going to need this later. So let me just do what I thought. So, it's just super handy, and it will save you time in the long run when you go to build if you've designed these pieces out. Okay. Another thing I'll do, we'll get to our list of checklists that I have about design best practices, and I try to to check the design against it and say, for example, am I doing an update in the loop, right? Or am I running a lot of records and there's a risk that I will hit a transaction limit? Should this be async? It's just things you can kind of step back once you've solved the problem and go, okay, how does this look? Okay, all righty. So in the lines of design, I wanted to put some tips from the Trigger Automation Decision Guide. So this is produced by Salesforce. And the big thing here is just to empower you to know there's not ever one right way to do something, or I should say rarely. And so the things that I have emphasized here are it's no less important to think about your organization and the people building and maintaining the automation. And I say this as a person who owned an org and a person who's come from a partner, right? If you're going with a solution that's custom code and you don't have a developer on staff, it's going to be really hard to maintain that, right? It may be worth it to you to take off some of the bells and whistles of the requirement and keep the requirement something that your in-house team can support, right? That's just something to think about as well. Also, documentation, okay? It's just as important as automation. It's so hard for us to troubleshoot or leverage partners or additional resources when we don't have what we've built documented well. And if you have an awful memory like me, it might be that you did some work last quarter and you need to now come enhance it and you don't remember what you did or why. That documentation can be very helpful for you to pick up quickly. And then ultimately, the best approach is one that works well for your business. So every company I've worked with, there's been a slightly different way that we document. There's a different level of detail we provide. There's a different way we provide it to the customer. So, whatever works for you, the big thing is if you can collaborate quickly, if you can troubleshoot quickly, if you can get ideas quickly, that's a good sign that you're doing it right. Okay, so now let's go into how we're actually going to design this particular set of business requirements. So I decided, okay, I'm going to use tasks. Okay, I'm not going to use a custom object. And we're going to use task queues to assign the work to the departments. Okay, I love tasks. There are some limitations on tasks that we'll talk about in a little bit, but overall, if I can use a standard object and it's going to work well for the business case, I'm going to try to leverage that. Okay, we're going to use just email distribution lists for the departments for notifications. And so what that means is I'm not going to hard code in Mary and Sally and Jim on the finance team for their email notification. I'm going to set up finance at whatever, and I'm going to let IT maintain the email notification. So that's a strategy I love to recommend. Sometimes because we on the Salesforce team don't own domains and email, we don't think about doing that, but it's usually very simple for your IT team to set up a distro, and then you can just have your business owner, when their team changes, just make an IT ticket to change the email recipients. It's one less thing that you have to worry about. We're also going to use flows to do the automation, so I don't need a developer. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll use Orchestrator. We could consider that at a later point, but we're not going to use it now. One nice thing about Orchestrator is that it actually uses auto-launched flows when it's scheduling things that are going to be run. So because we're using this flow design framework, which is a series of a main and then auto-launched flows, the auto-launched flows can just translate over. So that's a really nice thing about the design here. And then because each team has a different distro, right, they may want different details on the email and the task. And so what I'll usually see is like sales ops may not need as much information in the email because they're going to go to Salesforce and look at the record anyway to help them understand the problem. Legal or finance, they may not be as familiar with going into Salesforce. They might want to have a lot more, say, opportunity field information in that email alert directly to help them understand, priority and who should even work it. So we're going to use a custom metadata type for that. Okay. So here's the disclaimer about tasks. And again, I've had a love-hate relationship with them. There's lots of limitations, but once you know what they are, you can design accordingly. One of the big limitations is you can only have 100 fields, and that's in a higher edition. And for some reason, managed package fields do count toward that limit. So you can take a look there. But we've had implementations where we just couldn't do it due to the number of managed package fields. We only had like 4 fields left to do what we needed to do. Their reporting can also be a little weird, okay, and sharing can also be a little weird. And then you have the activity timeline, which is super cool. But sometimes I see that teams want more of what I call the old school way of looking at tasks, which is the related list view, it is possible to do that. And you can do open tasks and closed tasks. And I'll show you that when we get to the demo. And so, there's that. There's also lots of open ideas for tasks. So, take a look, see what's out there. But they do have queues. They are a standard object. Salesforce is continuing to build functionality for tasks. Another nice thing about tasks is a lot of managed packages or and integrations you use may already have as part of their model to create task records. I know on call centers it's typical to have a call logged as a task automatically by your CTI tool. So if you're trying to understand your team's work effort, you might have support already having tasks that show calls, and then wouldn't it be nice if any work items from sales that they work on already come into that format so that they're able to look at their whole body of work using the same type of object. So that's another reason. All that to say, think about what you want to do. Anything that we're going to do in the design here, you could easily tweak a little bit to use with a custom object if you wanted to. But what I would say is I'm very careful about whether I would use case as a work item for this is not. I love to keep case as like my holy grail of support and maybe success when it comes to like billing accounting type functionality. And so if I can use task to avoid case being used for this, I will gladly do so as well. Okay. So I wanted to show you this as kind of another piece as our admin responsibility that also sometimes includes business architecture, right? And so this is something I like to do. I'm a box checker, and so I like to take my acceptance criteria, which we produced at the end of our persona user story acceptance criteria list, and say, okay, let me write it all down and let me make sure something in my design speaks to it, so I can say with 100% certainty I'm executing on what they asked. Okay. So the first one was the sales rep can designate another team to work on their item. So how I'm going to do that is the user is going to be on an app. They're going to click on something. It's going to be a screen. They're going to enter some details, create a task. Okay. So that's the high level. How am I going to do it? With the page layout, a flow action, and a screen flow. Okay. This piece of it, I sometimes see business architects who are not Salesforce admins design. I would caution against that because, again, you've got to know something about Salesforce to build the solution design. You've got to know, why would I pick this versus that? So this what and this how is where I would see if you were going to split out your analyst team from your architect team. This would be the acceptance criteria, absolutely the realm of an analyst. The what and the how, you're really starting to go toward the architect, okay? Okay, work items are visible from the deal. That just means we need to see the tasks. I'll use the related list I mentioned for people who like to view it old school, and then we're also going to have the activity timeline. Okay, the work item is assigned to the correct team. So that one's pretty straightforward. We are going to create queues for the departments, and that task owner is going to be set to that department queue. The work item team can view the items. So we're going to make sure visibility is set up so that the work item team can see them. I say this a lot. I don't want to say it's too many projects, but there'll be times where we say, great, we'll just make a task for finance. And no one goes and asks finance, do you have Salesforce user licenses, right? And what you don't want to find out is you need to go buy a bunch of licenses you didn't think you needed because you made an assumption on those license counts. So be sure that Salesforce is the right solution if you're going to consider users who may not be power users or standard users in your org. Okay, so how I'll know it's working is when the task shows up in the right list. And the last item was the email notification. So we want to make sure the team gets it and it's going to send to their distro. Okay, I am not seeing any questions, so we will continue here. So what am I going to use to do this? I'm going to use flow, metadata type, a global pick list, custom fields, and page layouts. Excuse me. So we're going to go through what those look like on this slide. And then I do have the org up. So once we get to QA, if you want me to poke around in the org, we can do that as well. Okay. All right. So for my flow specifically, I like to design out what's going to happen. Again, I do this in the Excel document before I go into the actual builder. I can't tell you back when record triggered flows had come out, right? And the idea of that before insert, right? I knew it from as a developer concept in Apex, but we really never had declaratively this idea to do something in a before. And the big thing I almost wanted to stamp at the top of my desk was, if you're updating the same record, you need to do it in a before, right? So I'd write all this in Excel, be thinking I got to do it in an after, because that's how we always did it in Process Builder. And I'd actually sit there and say, is this an update to the record? Yes, it is. And I'd go through, and if everything was an update to the record, I wasn't creating a new type of record, then I could actually say, oh, Maria, this is a before save. It meets the criteria. So just things to think about there. Okay, so the flow, it's going to collect some stuff. Great. Some fields. Then I'm going to use my metadata type to give me some information on who to assign it to, how should I format it, who should I send the email to. I'm going to make a task, send an email alert, and I'm going to build in my error handling to use a fault flow. If that's not something that you're familiar with, I have a link to it. But the idea here is that if your flow fails, you have set up a way for the fail to do something, whether it's send you an email, whether it's make a record, something so that you can get that information. Now, this used to be a design pattern before Salesforce was able to send those automated emails for flows. I still like to do this, so I'll get 2 errors, because I can construct that body to say, this is the environment I'm in, this is the user that failed, this is the specific details about the flow and what it was trying to do, so that I get both emails and I can look at the one that I've built is a little bit more user friendly to go, okay, where is it? And I can you can easily see if it's prod or not in Salesforce's email, but I love to see sandbox at the top and just know, okay, this is not a production failure that's coming through. Okay, so here's the design check. These are the links that I mentioned. This general design list is one. These are probably my favorite places to go to gut check my design, right? I can't always be up to date with the latest and greatest, but these kind of are my reference point for what should I consider. So Salesforce has its best practices. Apex Hours does as well. Here's more information on that flow design pattern I mentioned and how to build a fault flow. Another thing I won't go into a lot of detail about, but I recommend you do, is always set up disable automation functionality and use it in your automation. So that basically means if you need to make sure something doesn't run, you have a mechanism built into your org to make sure that automation doesn't run. Okay. Event-driven architecture, that's a new one that I really like. It's the idea that maybe you don't use a insert or an update to trigger more stuff. You could consider something else, like especially platform events, which we can do declaratively now. We can use a different type of architecture to accomplish our automation needs. So just cool stuff to think about. Okay, and then the orchestrator tutorials, again, if you're interested in learning more, that's what I did. They're a great series. And so you can look at it. And then, of course, what I do next is I go, how much does orchestrator cost, or is it included? So there is a limit on how many you can use for free. So just something to think about when you say what tools are available and what's my budget. Specifically for this implementation, these are a couple that I used. How to create the record link dynamically, how to send emails from a flow. There's 2 options. And then also how to use custom metadata types and flows. So if these are things that are new to you, you can click these out to get more information on them. For me, the 2 that I spent the longest on was, how should I send this email? Should I use an email alert, which we all know from workflow rule days, or should I actually construct the email myself? Okay, so the plus of the email alert is it's really easy. But the con of it that I'm not a big fan of is every time it needs to change, if you're using good change management, I'm going to have to deploy it down, right? Or deploy it up, if you will. And say they have a team member that changes, we're going to have to be looking at, okay, does the recipient list need to change? That kind of thing. Also, say they decide this is it's working so well, I want a different email template if the priority is high from when the priority is low, right? And I want to see that in there. Well, there's another alert I need to go put together. So for me, hey, it's internal, not customer facing. I'm going to go ahead and go with the core flow action. Is it right or wrong? No. You decide for yourself, hey, what's going to make the best for this? Okay. Okay. So into the build we go. The first thing I wanted to show you is the global value set. And whether I'm going into a new org or an existing org, if I hear something like, here are normal departments we work with, I'll immediately go see, do we already have a pick list value set for this? Because if we don't, I want one. Because there's going to be a reason you want the same or similar group of departments listed somewhere else. And so, depending on whether you're in a squeaky clean org, that's great. You can start with this, or you might be inheriting something different. It just gives you the ability to do that. So I went ahead and built a pick list value set. You can see where it's referenced down there. And then here's the structure of the custom metadata type. So quick overview of metadata types. Think of like a custom object that's not available to your end users where you can put in information that you can use in other places. Okay, so like secret object only for admins to see. So in this one, I called it task helper. I have a couple of pieces of information I'm interested in. I'm going to be interested in some content for the body of my task in my email. The department is going to use that pick list I told you about. The detail, so if there's some specific information there, I put in something called a due date offset. So what that means is depending on which department gets the task, I am going to say this is when the task is due. And so let's just say for my business, sales ops needs to respond in 2 days, right? But legal is probably not going to respond for 5 days. I'm going to actually put this number of how many days from create should the due date be set to, and that can be changed. So say at a later point you wanted to say if the priority is high, change the number of dates. That's something you could build in here as well. Email recipient, so that's going to store my distro. What object is it related to? When I was building this, I said, this is great for opportunity, but say support wants this on case or customer success wants this on account. I'm going to go ahead and build in this idea of what object am I operating on so that I'll be able to use the same helper and records for those as well. Then what is the name of the queue? This is going to be a developer name you'll see, and I use that in the flow to query and get the ID of the queue so I can assign the task. I do that, we never want to hard code IDs, and this way, if the ID is different in the development org I'm in from production, it won't matter because the dev name is going to stay the same. Okay, and then this subject prefix, how I'll use that is basically in the alert that I send, I allow my business to tell me, what do you want the email to look like? Do you want it to say, alert, stop everything and help sales? Or do you want to say, a new opportunity has been created? So I'll let them put something in at the beginning, and then I'll use the flow to merge in some of the details about the opportunity as well. Okay, so here's the actual records. Here's a couple examples. So this one, customer success, objects opportunity, departments customer success. I always try to fill in the details so you aren't left wondering. So used for customer success tasks on ops. They wanted the prefix deal request. So imagine deal request, opportunity, whatever, right? For my email recipients, this is a neat trick if you use Gmail, and if you don't, you can set up a free Gmail. But if you just put in the plus sign after your regular, whatever you can actually put in whatever you want here, at least I should say a text string, and you can actually send emails to different places. So I've got plus customer success here. Their queue name is called customer_success. Okay, you can query and get your queue name or go to the page to see it. And then their due date offset is going to be 3. So that means the due date is going to be 3 days later. And I was actually telling Rikesh before this call, I hadn't really investigated whether I could use HTML in these emails or not. And so I said, whatever, I'll just put a placeholder custom message goes here. But you actually can put in HTML. So I went ahead and for the customer success example, there's an image here that will show an exclamation mark when it comes in, so that, I've got a little bit of rich text happening as well. Just to look at the kind of the other examples, the big thing would be see how the prefix is different for each of these. So there's that. And then you can see the plus, this is plus finance, plus legal ops, plus sales ops. So those can all be different as well. Even if you're just troubleshooting and you want to make sure it's sending to a different place than your default. Okay, so here's the actual kind of like list of flows. I wanted to show you an example of a custom flow filter or list view that I use. You couldn't do this with Process Builder, so I'm still very happy that I can do this now. And so here's my flows, and I wanted to just show it to you too to see how I name things. It makes it a little bit easier if you need to go follow up on work that I did. So all the task ones start with task, and then I use a pipe to keep things looking neat. And so the helper, I can see there's a helper main. So that's the first one that's going to run. And then I can see within the helper, there's one for account and one for opportunity. So if I'm on vacation and you have to troubleshoot this, you should reasonably go without even looking at the documentation. Okay, here's the main and there's the op. Probably don't need to look at the account one, right? And then if we do have time and you're interested in how Orchestrator works, I put a sample one in there. And then I wanted to show you how the record triggered flows show up, because your list view can show them. So on the record triggered flows, you'll actually see this trigger and triggering object set. Orchestrator does the same as well. This always used to throw me off because they're record triggered, but they still show up as auto launch flows if you use process type here. So you want to include in your list view trigger and triggering object if you want to be able to see that information as well. Okay, so here comes the screen flow. Screen flow is the easy one. So it's going to start, we're going to ask the rep some information, and then we're going to hit up the auto launch flow. That's it. Okay, and this is the beauty of the automation engine, if you will, because I could hit that automation auto launch flow anywhere I want. Maybe support doesn't get a fancy screen. They just make a task, and then we go into it. You could have a record triggered flow, invoke it for that use case. You don't have to use a screen. Okay, so then here's the task helper. So I like to call this like the traffic controller flow. It's the one that's going to call my other subflows that are going to do the work. So it's going to start, and the first thing it's going to look at is what kind of record am I on? So am I on an account or an opportunity? And depending on the answer to that, it's going to go launch the correct subflow. It's going to come back to the main one in order to get the task owner, assign some values, create the task, and send the email notification. Okay, and then I've got my fault flow. You can see here, this one also goes to the fault. Anything that does a query or a DML, you can tie to the fault flow. So I recommend that. And I will say I normally build in freeform layout. So I'm on team freeform for build, but I do think they look a lot better in auto layout, and I love straight lines. So I'll typically save them and activate them once they're back to auto layout. Okay, what kind of record am I on? I wanted to show you this in a little bit more detail. I think this is cool. I don't know how much this is taught to newer users, but back when we used to have to use workflow, I feel like I had to use this a lot more. But if you didn't know, for standard objects, there's always going to be a certain set of characters that the record starts with. So accounts always start with 001, okay? Opportunities, same thing. Case, same thing. If you have a custom object, beware, because it may change if you go from a sandbox to production. But once you're in production and you refresh them, they too will also start with the same three characters. It just, Salesforce isn't going to tell you what they are. So it could be different. If you build a custom object called work item and I do, they may have different. Whereas every org we've got, accounts are always going to start this way. So this is how the traffic controller works. Another thing I like to do is, the default here in decision is like none defined. I like to specifically call out no specific path defined, so that if I get an error, I can actually read the decision that it cleared, and it just helps me remember, like, hey, I planned for business use cases here. This record that came through didn't meet a business use case, so it just gives me that little hint of what I'm doing. Okay, if I go into the helper here, what is the helper doing? So it's going to get the opportunity and passing in the record ID. It's going to go find my task helper. So that's the custom metadata record. It's going to assign some values, and then it's done. And one thing I forgot about this, because I've been onboarding for a while and I forgot, you don't have to put in another subflow element back to the main. Okay, when a subflow stops, it automatically, Salesforce knows, go back to that main flow and keep executing. So don't bang your head on that one. Okay, you'll get some kind of an error if you try to do it. Okay, and here's how the get looks to actually get the custom metadata type. So I'm getting just like you would anything else, but my object here is called task helper. And remember, that was the name of my custom metadata type, right? And what I'm going to say is get me the one where the object says opportunity, and the department equals this variable. So this variable is being passed in all the way from the screen flow where the user is going to select it. It's going to go to the helper, and then the helper is going to pass it in here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get all of those data values. Then I'm going to assign them. So the subject, I'm going ahead and pulling in a subject formula that takes their prefix plus the opportunity name. I'm getting that due date. So what I'm doing is I'm saying just add to the due date, the standard due date, give me that value, that offset value, okay? For the email recipients, get me whatever was on the record, that helper record, give me that value. Owner name, same thing, okay? Now this isn't a queue, this is that developer name, okay? We're gonna query for the queue ID in a second. And then the body, I have something called body construct. And what that means is I actually get some information and then I use this text template to build the body and then I send the body back. That sounds a little morbid, but you'll see what that looks like in a little bit. Okay. So another thing in the main flow, okay, I forgot about this too. This is why notes are very handy. But when you go to start the subflow, okay, this is what it looks like. So I'm sending these variables, record ID, department, notes, priority. If you want to receive back the values from the subflow, then you need to remember manually assign variables and store those values. So here comes my body construct is going to be stored there. My due date's going to be stored there, the owner name, the subject. Okay, if you don't do this, what you'll find when you debug and you run this guy is all these values that should have been set are null. And that's your hint. Why isn't it being set? Did I not set it as an output variable? Did I not set it here? Those are things to look at. Okay, so how am I going to access it from the app? I put a little button there. So they have their standard log a call, and then I just called this one new task to other department. Okay, very straightforward. For the teams who are actually going to work the tasks, they'll have a list view. So this is an example of finances. You can, of course, customize these like you can for any list view. And then here's the actual detailed page for task. I like to think a little bit about this when I am building the UI, just because I feel like UI is so important to my users working well and wanting to work with me. I also feel like if I build a good user experience for them, right, and they really like it, and maybe even put in some above and beyond things, then when I have to tell them, yeah, what you're asking for needs a custom component and we don't have the bandwidth for it, we've built that relationship where that can come off easier. So for this task, what I've done is I've added a component to say if the task is related to an opportunity, show some details about the opportunity here, okay? So imagine a finance user who just wants to go into Salesforce, figure out the answer and close it. They don't want to look at the opportunity if they don't have to. They just want to click a link, see it, and finish it. Say these are all the fields that they need. They can see them. They never have to navigate to the opportunity. They can be done. You can set these up conditionally. So I could have the same layout, Lightning App Builder layout, and show a different set of fields if the person viewing is legal versus finance versus support. Sales ops, you may not put it on there because they will probably go look at the opportunity. So you have that flexibility as well. Okay. And then for the email message, like I said, I started with plain text, but was super excited to give the rich text a shot. So this is an example of what I stuck in there. So this is inside of that custom metadata type record. In the body content, I just put some HTML. If you are not comfortable with HTML, that's cool. I know I'm going to date myself here, but like I learned it when I was in middle school using LiveJournal and you wanted to embed something somewhere. And so there is a really great free website where you can learn HTML called w3schools.com. It even lets you, as part of learning different things, like just you could type in HTML image, okay, and it'll show you. And on the page, it'll show you common ways to do things, and then they'll have a try it out. So you can put this in there, hit try it out, and it'll show you how a website would render it. So that's my lazy person's way of doing it. I went in there and said, okay, does this load? And it was giant, so I changed the width, and I was on my way. I did briefly look at whether I could put this in files or documents and then push it, but I said, for this demo, I wouldn't, but it is absolutely possible that you could use a reference here to an image that's already hosted in your org. You just may want to make sure that access is set to public because people receiving this in an email won't be looking at it through Salesforce, okay? And here's a link to that blog post on custom email notifications. Thanks again to Rakesh for that. Great timing for me. Okay, and then here's what that body construct looks like. So the weird thing about it is I set it as plain text because I've got to pass it from the subflow to the main flow, but I can construct it as if it's HTML. So here's the actual content that is coming from the task helper, whatever I put there. So in the example I just showed you, it would show an exclamation mark and some text. Then these BRs just mean add a hard return. And then I'm saying, here's the notes. There's details, and then for name, get the opportunity name. For amount, get the amount. So you can change this based on who needs to get it. So you could build your construct differently based on that message. So again, for me, being lazy and not wanting to build email alerts, I would rather put this in here and then kind of go on my merry way. And if they need changes, I know I can push it with, a flow later if I wanted to. Totally, either option that would work for that. Um, One thing I was going to say about this that I did discover is you don't want to put merge fields into the actual body. Give me one sec. I need to turn an alarm off. So what that means is you do not want to put this bracket exclamation mark get opportunity name in the actual custom metadata type record. It will cause a flow error. Okay, and high level, if you remember, like kind of the issues with outside authentication methods being able to just push a random string in and get information. The idea there is they don't want variables, right, to be able to get information and you be able to inject something in there. And so I do have to get the actual record information from within the flow itself. Okay, so then this is what it looks like, actually bringing it back up is I store that content in my main flow here, and now I'm saying it's rich text. So even though I formatted it and it's HTML but plain text, in this guy I say, okay, now render that as rich text, okay? And then for the actual send email, this is what it looks like at the end. So body, subject, my recipients came out from the metadata type. And then this one, again, thanks to Rakesh, I was thinking it might want to have the actual body again to say, hey, put the body here. This is the rich text version versus the plain text, right? Because when we're building an email template, we have those two options, rich text, plain text. That's not what this means. This is looking for true or false. Okay, so I'm saying, yep, I'm going to give you the body as rich text. So that is true. Okay, when it shows up as an email, I just wanted to show you in case the demo does not work for some reason. This is what the email looks like. So you can see I've got my plus sign in the recipient list. My image shows up. I've got my main messages in bold, my notes. So this is actually what the user puts in the screen flow, and then the opportunity details. And because I use that cool trick to make a dynamic record link, I give them a nice link to click to get over to the record in Salesforce. Okay, and so just some tips on testing before we go into the actual demo. Always test as an end user. I put a link in here to how you can use Chrome profiles to do that. So I have just make up another Gmail address so you can put your extensions in it or whatever, and always log in that way. That way, if something works for you as an admin, great, go test it as the end user. If it's not working, it's kind of difficult to go in the same browser back and forth to troubleshoot. So I use different colors. You can see this one's blue. My tester is red, or excuse me, is green, and then production is like bright red. So if I'm ever in production, that just immediately alerts me, don't fool around in here. Okay. Other things that I do is in my same Google spreadsheet where I have my design, I keep a separate cleanup list in my roadmap. And so what that means is if there's something that I need to do or something that I learn, I put it in there till I can get it into my notes. And then my roadmap's just there. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this great new idea I had for this. I need to build this and kick it out the door, but it gives me a place to store it. Also, if you have a time deliverable, for me, I wanted to get the MVP up, right? So before this presentation, I had it up last week, okay? And then what was nice was I got Rakesh's email and I said, oh, I would love to incorporate this. I have the time to do that because the MVP is already up and working. You can use a Chrome extension called Salesforce Inspector to actually look at the data values. So for me, I'll show you how you can do that. And for me, for some reason, my due date offset wasn't working. And so I was able to just very quickly run it and go, it's still saying today. Let me look into that without having to go in the UI and click around to look for it. So some things that I learned that I put in here, I mentioned you can't use merge fields in a custom metadata type value, okay? I also learned, this one was fun, you can only have 15 outbound emails in a dev org. So I hit those 15 quickly one day and I just had to wait till the next day to check my emails. So that's just something to know. Another reminder, don't forget to set those subflow variables as available for output in order to send them back, okay? And then if you copy and paste from a blog post, that's amazing, and it has curly quotes, Don't forget to switch into straight quotes, okay, because that will cause the formula to not compile properly. Okay, so let's go in and do the demo. In this video, it may work for you when the slide deck is posted, but we couldn't get the sound to work when we tested, so I'm going to show it to you in the org directly. So give me a sec to get in there. Okay, and I am showing Burlington Textiles Weaving plant generator. Okay, I wanted to use Dickinson for some reason. So let me go in here. So I'm not going to follow my practice of testing as an end user. I am in here as an admin. But what the user is going to do is they're going to click new task to other department. So they're going to pick that department. I'm going to do customer success so we can see if that exclamation mark shows up for us. I'm going to say it's high, something really high. And maybe I want to say like, churn potential on the renewal due to a, dissatisfied support experience. Okay, so this is all my rep has to do. I hit next and they're done. Okay, so I can see a task has been created here. That's cool. I also put the tasks over here. So this is that list view I mentioned. So open activities, closed activities. And then if I want to go and look at the data around it, I can go directly into the list view here and I can see my task. This happens to be recently viewed for me because I made it. But if I go to the customer success list view, I can see it here as well. Okay. And then let me go take a look at my email real quick. One thing I wanted to show you too is if you do use your Gmail, you can save a search string like this and bookmark it. So you can see all my previous tests, but just another, I like to save on clicks sometimes or say something changed and I want to know when did it stop working. If I've got a view like this set up, I can. So here's the actual email. You will see this, be careful with this message because Salesforce is sending it, right? And it's sending it to a Gmail. So, you can ignore that. I can see my message rendered, the email image. Okay. My bold message went there. There's my notes. And then here's the opportunity details. And if I click on the link, it will take me back to the record. That's cool. So that's cool. But I think what's cooler is to see how to troubleshoot details and see that. So the next piece of the slide deck, if I keep going, um, will be the actual troubleshooting, okay? And so what I'm going to show you is in here, and you can change the speed on it, if you need to. But I want to show you how I would troubleshoot that once I was done. So say I didn't want to go in here and look at this task, okay? What I can do is this is Salesforce Inspector. That's the Chrome extension that I mentioned. And you can actually just stick in a query and say, show me everything. So I ran a query for task, and these fields here are the fields I'm interested in. So I want to know, did the priority assign properly? Did the description assign properly? Did my status come in? So without even going to the task list view, without even checking my email, I can see the record was created properly, okay? If you're using the flow debugger, you can also see your results here as well. And then one thing that I'll do if I get all my testing done and I want to clean up the org, in the same extension, I run a different query. You can look at your history of what you've run here. I'm just going to get the IDs. So I only have one now. I'm going to copy it. And what it lets you do is you can run a delete. So I'm actually going to say, go in here and run delete on tasks and paste in what I just copied and say run, and it's going to delete that task for me. So if I go back here, there's no more task. And then the task also doesn't show up on the user view. If I go back to that guy, it's gone. So for me, I don't know about you, but when I'm testing, I might build, I don't know, I might have 20 tasks and I don't want to look at them at the end of the day or the next day if I'm going to do a demo. So this is a really easy way with that tool to be able to go in and remove, those records that you created for testing. Cool. So my cleanup list, I do have some cleanup stuff. One thing, not everybody does this every time, but even people who are really diligent, sometimes you name a field something and it just doesn't make sense by the time you're done. Like you didn't actually use it for what you thought, okay? So go back in, make sure your field names are right. For me, when I made the task, I realized I didn't fill in the who ID, which is the related to or contact. And I typically have opportunities always have their primary contact set. So it would make sense that if I'm making tasks off of these, I could put the contact. So that might be something I do. And then on my screen flow, because I use my global pick list, it had the sales value, but it doesn't make sense for sales to use that, make a task to another team and then put sales in there. And so that's just a note I had in my list to say, let me do this once I'm done. Okay. And I do that so that I don't get distracted by doing these nice to have things. If I want to really get my end users testing, I can do those under the hood and get them out there before the next round of testing. It just keeps me focused. And then for my roadmap, I do like to keep people out of email if I can. So I might ask, hey, do I want to add a post to Chatter or a post to Slack? Okay. And what I like about it is people still can get email notifications, right? You can set up either Slack or Chatter for that. With Chatter, I like to use Chatter groups. And then it still provides visibility for maybe managers of those people who don't need to get the immediate notification and do the work to be able to come in and collaborate as well. Okay. Another thing that I like to keep in the roadmap is just to touch base with the business leads and the end users and say, hey, we did that thing that you asked for. How'd it go? Is there anything we can do to make it better? Right. So we get that. Um, you might look for other teams using tasks to see if they find it helpful. So say we did this customer success. It might be super easy to turn on that account piece and make this also for accounts. And then I kept on my notes, I might want to move to Orchestrator, but I need to remember to look into custom pricing before I do that. So an example of just things that I keep. And usually I'll pass that back to the main team, or whoever's handling roadmap for Salesforce to make sure they've got that on their docket. And with that, that's kind of everything I have prepared to present. I do have the org up if we want to look at anything in more detail. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Well, let me do a quick refresh on the community here and see if
Okay.
we have anything coming in there. And for some odd reason, it decides to be super slow for me. While we're doing that, though, we did have one question come in over the question widget.
Okay.
And it said, will you be sharing the slide deck? So there's a lot of good content in here. I'm absolutely certain people would like. So good news for everybody. We will post the slide deck when we post the YouTube video of the session recording. It'll be in the comments on that video that you'll be able to get a copy of for sure.
Yep.
So, all right, reloading the community, and I don't see any questions there. So, I mean, that was certainly a very thorough presentation, Maria. So, I know it's kind of a lot even for me to digest, and there's just so many things in here. I'm like, I need to take that back and figure out how to do some of that. Um, so one question I know I have with just a couple minutes that we have left, while anybody else might be thinking of their questions, is about how long did it take you to build um, like the flow, the process?
I
It
love,
seems
yeah.
like it would have been kind of complicated with all the pieces.
Yeah, I had heard you ask the question before, so I kind of prepared. I would say it probably took me an hour and a half to build the design, but then the clicks took me about a half an hour. And so I would say if I hadn't done the design first and just started with the clicks, probably would have taken me 5 hours, if not more, depending on all the variables I forgot about that I have to go back in and add. So if anything, the answer is not a lot because I'm used to typing and clicking, but it's the strategy part. If you can get that right earlier and where it doesn't take as much time, that's going to save you time on the click side. So total 2.5 hours if I take into play design build, actual build, QA testing.
Awesome. That is not nearly as bad as I expected you to say, to be honest. So.
Yeah. And if, I mean, y'all let me know, but if you're interested in seeing just how scrappy the design spreadsheet is, I could share that. And then just depending on the metadata, this is all using standard objects, right? So if we wanted to put a package together that has the flows as well as the custom object, depending on whether automation hours can post the change package, I'd be happy to share that as well.
Yeah, anything you want to send over, I think we can include somehow as a link for
Cool.
our attendees to get to. So we'll share as much as you're comfortable with.
Awesome. Cool.
So great. All right, doing one last check here. Looks like we may not have any more questions for today. So Maria, I just can't say thank you enough for coming to present. Thrilled to have you. And
And thank you as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to share.
yep, absolutely. The comments are rolling in. Thanks for sharing. That was incredible. Thanks, Lynette, for that. So yeah, a lot of good content here.
Awesome.
So thanks again, Maria, and we'll see y'all next time on Automation Hour.
Thanks. Have a great day and a great weekend. Bye, y'all.
You too. Bye-bye.